if I'm developing professional software, I feel like I should be using a proper development environment, not VS Code. So things like Cursor, Windsurf, they really put me off because of that. I'm not really interested in that. Copilot, let's just not talk about Copilot.
Welcome, James. Wanted to
Thank
talk
you.
about personal branding and building in public because there's a lot of myths and hype around that as a way of building a business or finding a job. You've done both in your, I think, own distinct style, if I may say so. So let's kick off with personal branding. How have you approached personal branding and has it helped you find jobs?
So, as you know, I've been on LinkedIn for quite a long time. I think I joined in like 2009. And at the time, I was doing, I had like my own development studio, and I was trying to spurring up business for that. And it didn't really work because, people don't care about yet another development studio. So I kind of left off at that point. But then around 2013 or 14, I started building a social network. And as part of that, I was building it very publicly for. It was specifically. Do you know Imager? Or have you heard of Imager before?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I was building it specifically for that community, and as part of that, I decided that we will get to Barely Fit in a minute, but there's like a history behind this. So I decided to build that publicly. So every single update, every week, as often as I could, I was sharing like designs, I was sharing ideas, I was getting feedback from people. And the result of that was when I launched this social network, about 20,000 people signed up in the first 24 hours. So that kind of really, at that time, that resonated with me, how powerful building in public can be. And on top of that, it kind of resonated with me, like getting feedback early and like getting people involved and getting like the actual community that's going to be using this involved, because it gave me a lot of good information, a lot of good feedback. And that kind of led on to the social network never really went anywhere because it just didn't. It didn't really have much thought behind let's build a social network. There wasn't really any other thinking behind it at that time. And it did grow to 100,000 members. But what I noticed is when I was looking for work, this kind of ties in with the work side of it as well. When I was looking for work, I had something tangible that I could talk about when I'm talking to employers. So when I was going into like an interview, I had this thing that I could say, this was the problem I was solving. This is how I was solving it, why I was solving it. And here's like the journey of solving it as well. So that kind of resonated on that side. And that actually landed me quite a few jobs because there was something out in the world that they could go and access, that they could go and see, that they could be like, hey, this guy knows what he's talking about. He knows what he's doing. There's proof of it. There's people using it. Like it's a thing, right? So I kind of took that at that point and then started getting more active on LinkedIn and started sharing. At first I was sharing memes and stuff, and it was a bit like, it was all right because I didn't really have a following at that point. I maybe had like 500 connections or something. I didn't really put much value in it. But then I started sharing my like personal journey, my difficulties, my struggles. I've always been very open. I've never really given a fuck if someone fires me or not. I've always been quite open, and I've never really been afraid of. I've always been in the kind of mindset that if you take ownership of your struggles, then no one can take that away from you. No one can affect you because you've already taken ownership of that struggle. So whatever you're going through, whatever you're dealing with, if you recognize and you're honest with yourself and you be like, yeah, this is my struggle, this is what I'm dealing with, it doesn't really matter what anyone else thinks. That's yours now. You own that, right? So I started sharing that on LinkedIn more often. And when I was having, especially mental health, because I think that at the time, I think it gets talked about more often now. But I think sort of 2016, 2017, people didn't really talk about that. They were afraid to talk about that in case their employer didn't like them talking about it. And I just didn't care. I wanted to share what I was thinking, what I was feeling. and that kind of helped, that kind of resonated with other people, because other people felt like they were going through similar problems, similar journeys, and it kind of resonated with them. So that helped me kind of start building an audience around that as well.
So I think it's awesome that you shared the mental health journey, because a lot of people struggle with that. And I think it's very stereotypically British thing that we don't talk about it. We kind of, bottle it all up, sweep it under the carpet, and try and move on. And I think it's great that we are now talking about it and it's being more open. And it makes it easier for people to go and feel confident reaching out for the support and the help they need, but also for people not to feel that it's just me. And again, it's same with imposter syndrome. I think it's a lot better that we all talk about these and people realize that they're not alone, that there are other people going through the same sort of thing.
100%.
So I think that ownership is great. And again, as you said, if you're out there saying, this is me, this is how I am, then nobody can really hold it against you or put you down about it. And if they do, it's more a reflection on them and their own problems and their own issues.
100%.
I wanted to say awesome about the 20,000 and then 100,000 users. I mean, that's an amazing achievement. There are so many people that try and launch a business or try and launch a community and struggle to get their first 10, their first 100. Getting to 100K is quite amazing. And yeah, it hugely proves the value of it. And I couldn't help but write down, it's almost a trigger phrase now for people, but I wrote down agile. So I think you perfectly demonstrated in that, and it just made me think you were being genuinely agile, not the agile that people shove down your throat with, Scrum as they think that we should be doing it, or normally misinterpreting Scrum, or some kind of agile with capital A where they've got a certification, but the genuine, real core heart of agile of have small iterations, talk to the customer, get feedback. And you demonstrated why it's so powerful. You go and sit in a room and build something for 2 years and then go, ta-da. And everyone goes, no, I didn't want that. Where, as you've been out there saying, this is what I'm building, and people going, presumably giving you feedback, oh, I love that, want that, or why are you doing that?
100%.
Wouldn't it be better to do this? That means you were genuinely being agile, presumably, and reflecting that feedback from your customers, iterating, and the proof's in the pudding. You got 100,000 people using it. That means it resonated with people. It was serving a need, and you got that feedback. So let's pull that agile thread a little bit more. Why do you think so many companies get agile so long? Because you've proven that it's simple. You can go out there and do it without having to follow a framework. You've proven the value with a sole developer.
I'll take devil's advocate a little bit there, because whilst I did prove that it can build something that people want, and that's 100% true. We even like down to voting to the name, to the logo, all of that lot. I did that with the community that was going to be using it. I built an abomination, and the reason that it failed is because it didn't have the care and attention that it needed. Not just from a business sense, but it was very quickly built. I built it in a course of about 3 or 4 months. I was trying to outpace another group of people that said they were building the same sort of thing. We beat them by a day. The launch beat them by a day. So then we got the mass of people. But the actual quality, there was no real intention there beyond, I want to build something for the community. I wanted to build, this is pre-Discord, so I wanted to build like chat rooms and ways for people to meet up. And we actually did real meetups. We did meetups in like London, about 70 people turned up, and they came from all over the world. It had a lot of personal impact, but from a technology point of view and a business point of view, it was a complete failure. There was like, it was an abomination. It was like a combination of OpenFire, which was like a XMPP chat server. It combined with PHP, jQuery, JavaScript, HTML, all that lot, and then combined with like a socket server, and it was all shoved on one. Well, at one point it was several servers, but it was all shoved on like one server, and it was just, there was no tests. There was barely any typing because PHP didn't really support typing back then. It was, by all means, an abomination. And frankly, when I shut it down in 2018, the reason I couldn't grow it was because I hadn't put that thought in the first place. But then also, it was such an abomination, it was impossible to build on top of it. It needed to be built from scratch, essentially. So whilst I was agile in the sense of got shit done, got things in front of the customer, this is maybe not the best sales pitch for agile because it was an abject failure, right?
So no, I think that's useful because that's honest. Because agility means that we can respond to those changing requirements. We can respond to the business need. Now, sometimes that business need is really high quality. Sometimes it is changing requirements. Sometimes it's time to market. And, there's no escaping that iron triangle, as the project management people used to put it, of we can go fast, or we can go cheap, or we can go at quality. You've got to compromise something somewhere. And agile doesn't guarantee that you're going to somehow magically, beat the laws of physics, that you can go fast, respond to all customer needs, and still have amazing quality. We try with things like extreme programming and by putting in automated tests and CI/CD to show up that quality, but you're still going to have that trade-off. If you want to rush to market and beat someone else, you're going to make those trade-offs, aren't you?
Yeah, 100%.
And I think it's naive or overselling some certification when people try and claim that you're going to get it all. It doesn't work that way, does it?
To answer your question, why do I think that businesses fail at agile?
Mm-hmm.
I think this falls into the remote work camp as well. I think that a lot of businesses fail to let go of control. I think that a lot of businesses feel that they need to have control over every aspect of the build process. And I feel like whilst agile doesn't mean that you lose control, it means that the control is more deferred to product and development than it is to management. And I think when we look at remote work and like the return to office mandate and things like that, whilst I know there's speculation that it's because of property, and I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think in a lot of cases, it's because those management layers struggle to let go of control and they need that control. And they feel that by having people in the office or by having Scrum or by having SAFe, they enforce that control. They feel that they are in control of that situation when it's not necessarily the case, but it's kind of like a comfort thing, I think.
So I slightly disagree, but you got me on the last sentence. I'm not always sure that it's necessarily about enforcing the control, but more about the comfort, because they feel scared and they feel uncomfortable without those things. So even without necessarily thinking I have to be in control, it's more feeling, oh my God, I'm out of control. If I can't see people, don't know what they're doing, it's that lack of comfort. And in a way, I'm not surprised, because I've been a manager for a big chunk of my career, and I have been sent, I think, on 4 lots of management training by different companies, and every single time this is how we fire people.
What?
And I'm like,
that's horrific.
Okay, great. That's how you fire people and stay within the law. Good. We should do that. But could we not focus on how I hire the right people into the right position? Yeah. How I motivate the right people? How I create the environment for them to succeed? Let's start assuming that they're going to succeed and figure out how we create the environment for that first. Not, it's all gone wrong, this is how we kick him out the door. So it's always disappointing we don't do that. But I've spoken to so many managers, and it's held true for them as well. Most of their training has been how you deal with poor performance, not how we actually get it right and don't get to that point. And that really bugs me, because I actually think that most of the time when we get to poor performance, it's because we have failed as leaders at whatever level of leadership we are. We hired for the wrong thing, or we hired the wrong person, or we interviewed badly, or we changed our situation and we now want a square peg and we've got a round hole. So we haven't moved people around within the organization or given them the opportunity to move, or we haven't got them the training. We haven't created that environment for people to succeed. So personal rant aside, I still see this when people get interviewed as well. They talk about, how do you deal with poor performance? And they always seem to expect us, well, I go for a PIP, do this, this, and this, and then we fire them. And that really bugs me, because actually, if you've been a manager long enough, you've had poor performance for, somebody's family member got really ill and they had to care for them. Somebody's family member was in an accident and is now in hospital and they're caring for them, stressed about that, whatever. somebody's personal health were changed, or their kids are struggling at school. There's so many different reasons that are often we need to approach it with empathy. We need to approach it with supporting them, or the job role has changed, and you hire them as a C++ developer. You now want them to do Rust, and they don't want to do it. Again, that's not necessarily their fault. The situation moved around them. So we need to have so much more empathy, so much more focus on how do we get the best out of people? How do we create the environment to succeed? Anyway, I shall stop ranting about that.
Can I just add to that as well? I think
Sure.
that that kind of feeds into a lot of the hiring process generally, because you've probably seen it on LinkedIn as well. There's a big emphasis on not trusting the people that you're hiring. And I think when you start on the basis that you can't trust the people that you hire, because maybe you're hiring, you're offering too low a salary or something like that. So the people that you actually end up interviewing aren't the high quality people that you want to bring into the business. They're the ones that will accept that role kind of thing. So you don't trust them from the get-go. You bring them into the business because they're the only ones that accept that role. And then through their entire career, you just don't trust them. So then that's enforced by like all of your process. That's enforced by like when things go wrong, like how you manage them and how you manage. Again, it's like you don't want to manage them out, but by the sounds of it and by what you're saying, all these managers are trained to manage them out rather than manage them in and try to like build them up and encourage them. And I think like not even just on a, I'm going to go off on a tangent again here, not just
That's
on
cool.
a like a on a business level, but this is also in like on a personal level. You find that the people that have good friends around them and strong relationships are the ones that build people up. They don't break them down. They don't tell them they're shit all the time. They don't tell them they're wrong all the time. They try to support them and they build them up. And I think that's very reflective in the working environment too. If you build people up, if you assume the best, and if you assume that they want to achieve the best results, then you're going to get more out of someone, even when they have a down day, than if you constantly berate them, if you constantly challenge them, if you constantly tell them they're shit and try to manage them out. So that was just a kind of a side thought there.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to say that management is like parenting, but most of us got families. Most of us had parents or are parents. Think about it in your family life. If your parents are constantly telling you you're rubbish, doesn't build you up as much as your parents saying, we don't want to be ridiculous, like, oh, well done, you're a winner at something you failed miserably at. We do need to support people in building a bit of resilience, but you need to, it's supporting people. It's like, well done, you did your best, you tried. Here's some areas for improvement, and let's work on it together. And that's support, and you bring them up. As you say, that's going to increase people. Just putting them down, you're not going to get very far. And we should all, as managers and as people and teammates, reflect on that. As like, somebody constantly put us down. Did we want to do our best with them? Did we want to work with them? Did we want to, go to the pub with them, or go out for a meal with them, or hang out with them, or whatever? No, of course not. Yeah, you're right. It's absolutely building people up and supporting them. It's always way better. Should we go back to kind of that personal brand and building in public then? So you build in public, and you mentioned that thing built to 100k followers, and it got you the next lot of jobs, and it was because you could point at something. I think that helps, that you can point at something and say it was successful. I mean, 100k is way more successful than most people have been. Do you think if it hadn't been as successful, it could have still been as useful?
Yes, because again, it's that tangible thing that I've solved a problem for. It's not just, and I guess the other issue is really with when you're working, especially as a software engineer, or software developer, whatever you want to call it, when you're working in companies, you're usually under NDA, so you can kind of point at, oh yeah, I worked for that company, I kind of did this vague thing, but you can't really talk in detail. You can't talk about technologies you use, how you use them, specific problems. You can talk generally about problems you've solved, but not very specific problems. And so, like the first 24 hours, the code was so bad. At one point, for some reason, everyone had the same profile picture. We had like 10,000 people also, and the actual website. So it was, you kind of thrown into a chat room, but your profile was also on a map. So when you signed up, you set your location and it put you on a map so people could see people close to them and stuff. And basically, this map was just full of the same picture because of a mistake that I'd made. I can't remember what it was, a long time ago. But again, it's one of these things where it's just kind of, it's a funny thing because it did no harm. It was just silly. The community played with it at the time as well. Everyone thought it was hilarious that they were all the same person. And then when you're talking in an interview, it just kind of, it shows humility, and it shows a problem that you can express how you solved it and why you solved it and what the outcomes and stuff were, like the community, the customer outcomes and product outcomes. When you don't have that, you either have to rely on your previous work experience, which if you've got an NDA, that's pretty difficult to do unless you do it very broadly. But people don't really engage with broad problems like, oh, I solved this PHP problem. Oh, great. And like everyone solved a PHP problem, right? PHP is a problem. But like, or like your other projects, so like your side projects and stuff. And again, if you're not solving actual problems, it's very difficult to ground what you've built in a problem. So again, talking through it, oh, I built a to-do list. Well, why did you build a to-do list? What was special? Right? No, nothing special. I just thought I'd build a to-do list. Like, it's not interesting. It's not something that you can engage with. Like the person interviewing you can't ask questions really because it's not unique. Everyone's built a to-do list, so it's just, I think even if it was a major flop, it still would have been something that we could have talked about and engaged with, and the conversations would have still been the same, but there's still that wow factor. Hey, this had 100,000 users. That always used to get people, because they're like, that's very different to someone building a social. Everyone builds a social network as well. That's very different to someone building a social network and getting 10 users. Is like, you don't have any scaling problems with 10 users. Hopefully you don't have any scaling problems with 10 users. You don't have any security problems. You don't necessarily, like, any of the problems that you'd surface through just having more users don't happen when you've got 10 users. But when you've got 100,000, you get weird little scaling bugs. You get everyone's profile picture is exactly the same. You get all these odd little issues that are interesting things to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why in coding challenges, and when people ask me about it, I would say go and solve something real world. For coding challenges, I push people away from doing things like a to-do list and pick things like recreate a Redis server or build a web server. Again, they're not necessarily unique, but they do involve going a little bit deeper. And I encourage people to go and learn the network protocol, learn how it works, learn how HTTP works, for example. And that's going a different way to the scaling, but it's getting down into that deep understanding. So again, go and talk about something. You can talk about the difficulty of parsing a network protocol and how you identify message frames and so on in TCP, or you can talk about the unreliability of UDP and how you build code to handle that. So it's getting into that depth a lot more, isn't it?
I've been through the coding challenges, and that was something that did impress me, was that it was unique challenges. It wasn't just a to-do list. It wasn't just build a Minecraft clone, whatever that means. It's actually things that is going to get people involved in like different technologies, and it's things that are going to get people, like building a web server is actually quite an interesting challenge, because at what point in your career are you going to build a web server? Like, why would you build? There's plenty of web servers out there. Why would you build one? So just the fact that you're building one, kind of, you're going to start learning about maybe like the HTTP protocol, like you said, TCP/IP, maybe UDP as well. Like, you're going to learn about ports. You're going to learn about like content delivery. There's all sorts of these little bits of information that maybe as like a new developer, especially, and this happens more often, newer developers kind of focus on just maybe React or like Angular. They don't necessarily quite often, they don't necessarily understand the HTTP protocol that kind of handles all this data and handles this like transmission between the back end and front end. Whereas if they're building something like a web server, like they need to learn parts of it by default. It's kind of, it's just a bit more of an interest. So that was something that I noticed when I went through like coding challenges, was just how interesting they can be.
Yeah, and the web server is a great one. Is hopefully you're never going to go and implement your own web server. There are plenty of good ones out there that are production quality. But by implementing it and seeing how it works, you get a better understanding of how to use them correctly and how to deploy them. By building the HTTP, you understand it. And I was shocked a few years ago when I was working with a team, and we had an external team that were in effect acting as a customer. And their engineers didn't understand that HTTP requests can fail. They thought it was very simple. You call a REST API and you were guaranteed to get a response. And if you didn't get a response, it was your system that was down. And I was shocked to realize that they didn't understand that the internet is not reliable, that networks are not reliable, packets can get lost, things
scary.
can go down. And that if you don't get a response, you can't make a connection to a server. It doesn't mean that that server's down. It could mean that there's a network problem between you and the remote server. So getting that knowledge helps you build more robust systems. So even if you're a front-end developer, having a stab at building a web server will help you understand what happens when you make that request back to, when you do a fetch in your JavaScript. What happens there and what are the failure modes you can get? So it'll still make you a better software engineer at whatever level. Cool. So as well as building a public, you've been streaming on Twitch. Has that helped with the job search?
I don't know. I think actually the opposite, because the problem with streaming is, I say the problem, but the sort of challenge with streaming is, for most of us, you get streamer brain. So you could be the greatest software engineer in the world, and the moment you start streaming to an audience of people, you just don't know what you're doing anymore. Like, nothing makes sense. You can't even make a simple JavaScript application. So I think that when you get to a certain point, it's that numbers thing. It's like, well, I've got 1,000 followers on Twitch, so it adds credibility to your ability to maybe not technically, but it adds credibility to your ability to talk to people and engage with people. And if people are following you on something so public, it means that hopefully you're likable, you're easy to talk to, because they don't follow people that they don't want to talk to, right? They're there to, they want you to entertain them. So either you're an absolute cretin and that's the entertainment, or if you're doing something like coding, then you're engaging, you're not judgmental, you're supportive and you're chatty and stuff like that, and that's what they like. So I think the numbers helps, but I think if you're quite a new streamer, aside from it being horrible because no one's watching, you're just sat there talking to yourself for 3 or 4 hours or whatever you do it for. I really hated those. I think everyone hated those days, but I really hated those days. Like, it's also the fact that you've got no credibility then. So you can't really use it as credibility. Like, oh, I'm a streamer, great, you got 10 followers. There's no credibility there. So not only can they not validate your capability, but then also you've got no credibility built up by like people watching you and engaging with you and talking about and all this lot. I think the other side of it is, and I've had this a few times, potential employers come and watch your stream, and sometimes that's good. It depends on the moment. So my last contract, before I went into the interview, I was streaming because I've been streaming quite a lot over the year. And my colleague, or the lead that I would be reporting to, was apparently lurking in my stream. And I think I was playing about with Swift and I was playing about with Kotlin, like both at the same time. I was working on something on Barely Fit, and I was doing something both in Kotlin and Swift. And he didn't say anything, but then when we went into the interview, he said, well, I've already interviewed you, you just didn't realize it. And he because he was so impressed that I was like working with these different languages and like I was explaining it and talking it through, he was basically happy with my technical skills. And then basically the whole interview went from like a half-hour chat to a 2-hour chat, because we were all just nerding out. We were just talking about like the good old days and like retro gaming and stuff like that. So they were happy that I was technically capable, and they just wanted to get a feel for me and how I would tackle their projects and stuff like that. So, but then other times I'm sure people have like come into my stream and seen me make a complete mess of something or not understand the most basic thing in the world, and that's probably put them off as well. So maybe a double-edged sword on that front. You need to identify whether or not they've seen your stream.
So I was thinking from that streamer brain perspective. So it's interesting you say that. I was thinking that maybe by the streaming, you've got used to very much working in public. And a big fear that a lot of people have is coding in interviews, because they feel awkward coding with somebody watching them, whether it's in the office scrolling on a whiteboard, or whether it's doing it over a video chat or a screen share. A lot of people feel kind of nervous that somebody else is watching them and judging them. So I thought maybe the streaming had again given you, what's the right word? It's kind of face the fear and do it anyway. So by doing it for hours and hours on end, perhaps you've got a bit more used to it, got used to, again, you see a lot of cases where people talk about, oh, somebody did okay doing this DSA test, but they didn't talk, they didn't say what they were doing. And I've popped onto your stream a few times and I've tried to say
My
hi when I do.
condolences.
But all the way through, you're talking about what you're doing. So I'm thinking maybe even if nobody watches it, it's perhaps a useful experience to practice talking through your thinking process, to be able to demonstrate what you're thinking through and remove some of those nerves that kind of feel the fear and do it anyway approach.
So I reject tests, like tech tests. I just reject them. I just refuse to do them because they're not reflective of the job. And I think that any company that decides to use them as a tool when they're not reflective of the job is kind of, it's short-sighted. And then I think, well, how else do they approach work? You know, at the end of the day, if we're doing hypothetical situations that have got nothing to do with the job, then what's the job like? Like, what are we, you know, what kind of crazy stuff are you going to ask me to do when we're actually doing the job? Are you just going to make up random deadlines or make up random processes that are unnecessary, but they give you that sense of control? So there's that aspect to it. I think when I've been in a situation where there's maybe whiteboarding or something. So there's been a few situations where I've been thrown into, or I've gone into an interview and maybe they didn't explain what the interview was going to be about. So in fact, the current role, that's exactly what happened. There was like 4 stages. The first stage was with the recruiter, and that was just a friendly get to know each other, see if I'm an idiot or not. And then the second stage was with the engineering manager. And the engineering manager, the interview was meant to be, just as far as I understood it, was just meant to be a chat. But it actually turned into a whiteboarding exercise where basically, I mean, it was virtual, but it turned into a whiteboarding exercise where they had a problem, random problem. It was just complete nonsense. Like, as not nonsense, but it was like it didn't exist. It was just a problem that they'd chosen, and they wanted me to talk through my thought process around it. So I wanted the job. I wasn't going to just turn around and say no. I don't like the process, and I don't usually work well in those processes anyway. So instead of saying no, and instead of walking away, I kind of defaulted to Chatterbox, which is what I do a lot anyway. So what I did is I said, look, I'm not very good at these processes. It's not generally how I think, but I want to work with you guys. So I'm willing to give it a try. I'm willing to try. I just don't know how well I'm going to do. And then I just started talking. So I just looked at everything that was on the screen. And as we were talking through the problem, I was just literally just talking about the problem. Any inane thought that comes into my head was just, I was just sharing that. And I tend to do that. It's the same with like when I'm doing technical, I'm probably doing it a bit now as well. When I'm doing like technical interviews, I found that if you've got a good rapport with the interviewers, the conversations, like it, they're not, for me at least, they're not fixed conversations. They're not static. They're not, we need to be done in 10 minutes. They're just kind of chaos and nonsense. We're just talking about random technologies. We're bringing up random subjects left, right, and center. Like it's it's like a pub conversation. It's just, you're a bit drunk, you're just talking shit. And that's kind of what I do in the tech interviews as well. So like, again, this place, they had me review a PR, and instead of being very kind of analytical about it and structured about it, I just started picking apart and saying out loud what I was thinking. And that started a conversation, and that kind of builds on it. And then it kind of gets well, at least for me, it kind of builds my comfort level with the people, because the more I'm talking, the more they're talking, the more they're talking, the more comfortable I am, because I can understand their mannerisms. I can see how they're like reacting to things. And then I just, like, it doesn't really matter. But tech tests, I don't know. If I was given a surprise tech test, I'd probably just do the same. I'd just talk through it. I would be very loud, very vocal. They'd probably hate that. Well, if they're good, I think if it's a good company, they wouldn't hate that. But if it's a bad company, they'll probably hate that. And then I would just literally just talk through my thinking, even if it's just nonsense, even if it's questioning myself, even if it's like, I've got this idea, but then like backtracking and being like, oh, actually, that's a shit idea. We shouldn't be doing that. And then just talking through. That's kind of how I work. And again, I don't know if I just answered any questions. Just went off a complete nonsense. Now you know what it's like interviewing me.
I think you sort of supported my point that by doing the streams, you've maybe got better at thinking out loud and sharing that. And that is what works well in an interview for you. And
wait. I was like that before. I started streaming because I'm like that.
Right.
So it's the other way around. So maybe it has reinforced it. Maybe because I've gotten used to talking to more people. Like some streams, you got 30, 40 viewers. One stream I had like over 150. So you get used to talking to lots of different people in lots of different, like most streams I got 2 people. But sometimes it gets really, you get used to talking to different people from different walks of life. I've spoken to so many new developers because new developers are generally the ones that want to like watch in and try and learn from like experienced developers on these streams. And so you get to understand like different mindsets and different ways of talking and different ways of conversing. So maybe it reinforced it, but I've always been very confident and talkative, and to most people's annoyance, quite frankly.
So I still think that sounds like it would be good practice. A lot of people need that experience to explain to other people, particularly new developers. And I'm going to go off on another rant here. One thing that really annoys me about supposed senior developers is when they say new developers are net negative and I don't want to mentor them because it's a waste of my time. That really annoys me because we were all junior developers at one point. We all learned because somebody took the time to share their knowledge with us. So, give back a little. But also, even now, after I've been doing this for 30 years, I still train junior developers and I still learn something from doing that. I never
100%.
resent training somebody that is new. In fact, even today, I have spent time with people who have never programmed before. I don't mind doing that. It's a good investment of my time, and I will still learn the occasional thing from it, even if it's just how better to explain a point. So I think for a lot of people, actually going and streaming or doing that one-to-one coaching with somebody, learning how to explain to somebody at those different levels will be very, very useful and will help in an interview, because there is nothing worse when, and again, I've had this with a candidate say, talk me through your thinking, or my kids have heard this story so many times, they're going to hate me mentioning it again. But I interviewed somebody once who was coming in for a junior role. He was about to graduate from a university, and we were an AI company, actually. And he had been studying artificial intelligence as part of his degree. And I asked him, well, so you've been studying artificial intelligence. Can you talk to me what's on your course? And his answer was just like, well, AI, innit? And I was left with, can I have a little bit more detail? Are you studying neural networks, evolution computing, logic programming? Yeah. Neural networks, innit? AI, innit? So just having that ability to come out and share a little bit more and talk in a bit more detail and talk about your thinking. I mean, he was about to graduate, so I didn't expect him to come and be an expert in it all, but just be able to talk through what you've done and say, yeah, I did a project in neural networks and it was only a little Didi network. I did handwriting recognition or something. Would have been great to just share that idea, share the thinking process. And I've also interviewed people where, again, same company, we needed to think through some problems and we needed a certain problem solving mindset. So I did have an interview task where it's like, we want to solve this problem. How would you approach it? And it was a problem that I'd found on the internet and changed to represent the kind of thing that we did without compromising any of our IPR and without having to have any domain knowledge, because we were very heavily involved in networking. And I wouldn't expect most people to have that domain knowledge. But so many people, it ended up not being the best question in the end, the learning experience and me as well. So many people froze up because they couldn't talk through their thinking process. They couldn't ask the questions. And they got more obsessed with, well, I need to know all this knowledge about this technology or that technology. Where the technology was just to try and make it sort of real. It wasn't specific. So I think practicing those ways of talking through things are very, very useful, and we all underestimate that. But yeah, maybe you already had that before the streams, but the streaming might be a good way for people to practice.
I agree with the mentoring of juniors as well. I think that so many businesses, well, I don't think they've got it backwards. They have got it backwards, but I don't think they see it as backwards. A lot of businesses hire junior developers as cheap resources, not as an investment. And I see junior developers as an investment. And I think that if you're hiring a junior developer, the point should be that you're investing in them, you're training them, you're mentoring them, you're building them up, you're giving them goals so that they can then develop into that mid-range to that senior over time within the business. It builds that loyalty, it builds trust in that business, it builds domain knowledge. Now, I'm not saying that they don't deliver stuff during that time. Of course they do. They're always going to be delivering things. But I think there should be maybe 60-40 split. 60% of the time is you mentoring them and 40% is them delivering stuff. And I think that a lot of businesses get that horribly wrong. And I think it's very telling of a business when you ask what do your junior developers do? What are they actually doing? Because when they say, they're all delivering this, that, and the other, they're using AI to build blah, 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 it's kind of very telling about the culture in that business. It's not an investment. They're just a cheap resource. And the company doesn't give a shit if they fail or not. They don't care. It's not about that investment to the company. So I completely agree with that. And I think it's very telling of a senior developer. If they see mentoring a junior developer as a hassle, that doesn't scream senior developer to me. That's at all. That screams the absolute opposite. That screams inflated title to me. Because I think as a senior developer, sure, it takes time, but you're going to learn stuff and you're going to reinforce your own knowledge. And at the same time, it comes back to that building someone up. You're going to be building someone up whilst you're doing it. And I think that's, by the end of it, you may slow down initially, but as you build that person up, you're going to double your speed. You're going to get faster. As a team, you're going to do things a lot better. So why wouldn't you want to? Why would that be a problem?
Absolutely. And even if you don't learn anything technically from them, you are learning how to communicate better. You're learning how to lead. You're learning how to explain things to people that aren't as technical as you, all of which is necessary for stakeholder management, for working with your management and managing upwards, for working with product owners, for working with other people in the business. And if you want to go past senior to staff or principal, you have to start being able to interact and influence without authority.
Yeah, 100%.
So it's all building valuable skills. So if you can't see that as a senior developer, you're not senior.
I completely agree.
Okay, so rant aside, you have built in public Barely Fit as well, which is it's solving your problem, I think, if I've got that right. But it's also been
that's the point of it.
I think an amazing demonstration of the value of building in public and building something really interesting, and you come across a lot of challenges along the way. So what have been the main challenge you've had in building, launching, and then sort of promoting Barely Fit?
So I think the interesting thing here is that originally it was to solve my own problem. I was 180 kilos. I'm now at 133. I'm not saying Barely Fit has been the sole reason for that, but Barely Fit was the kind of catalyst for it, because I was sharing my weight measurements and stuff, and I was using lots of different apps, and it just didn't really work for me. I wanted something that I had control over and something that made it simple. But I didn't actually start with the mindset of building in public. The idea wasn't to build in public. But when I kind of started talking about it, I noticed people's excitement, and even the name Barely Fit didn't come about until I started building in public. So there wasn't a name for it. It was going to be called James Fit or something ridiculous. And I started playing about with a bear. And then because I'm a loudmouth on LinkedIn, so I was already sharing bits and bobs on LinkedIn because it was funny and I wanted to share what I was doing. And then because people were engaging with it, I don't know if you used it or seen you must have seen all the bears.
Everyone's seen all the bears. Can't miss them.
But that's just kind of me getting carried away. So that wasn't the plan. There was no plan there. The plan was to build an app that solved the problem of 4 apps for me. But as soon as I started building public, everyone's excitement and the fact that people were getting a kick out of like the kind of ridiculousness of some of the things I was doing. I think at one point I did like a startup screen where it had like you could either log in or you had Just Eat button, and then you press Just Eat and it would take you to Just Eat instead of like tracking your food or whatever you wanted to do. So it was stupid stuff like this that kind of then birthed the creative side of me. So that was then like, I love how people are engaging with this. I really want to be creative with this. And then that's where Barely Fit came in. And then that's where the bears came in. And then that's where all the rest of the nonsense came in. And so building public, I thought that there wasn't any risk because I was building it for me. Like, it didn't matter if someone was seeing it. I wasn't building anything unique. There was lots of fitness apps out there. There's lots of nutrition apps out there. Wasn't special, so who cares if someone copies it, right? I thought that by sharing it public, I might learn of problems that other people have got. And that's definitely what happened. So as I was building it, people shared their problems and said, hey, could you if you're going to be sharing this with everyone, could you add this in or could you add that in? And that's happened as it's gone along as well. From a problem perspective, I guess the biggest one is more of a personal one. It's the expectation. So I was quite happy with a very basic app that had like a couple fields in it, very developer UI, just did the job. But because now I've got a following, and now because people want this app, I've now got to add polish to it. I've got to make sure that when I release something, it's not just yet another app. It has to be something that people want to use. That first impression to me was really important. And I could have released a lot sooner, but I don't think I would have got the same first impression if I hadn't have done the level of polish that I'd done. And it's still an MVP, but that kind of expectation that people wanted it from me meant that I went above and beyond in polish for the initial release. I don't think I really encountered any other problems. I guess you get people telling you to shut up and like go away with your stupid bears and stuff like that, but that's just being on like social media, really. I don't really see that as a problem.
So I remember you having a few challenges with, I think, Apple, getting an app in the App Store. But I'm going to pull at the MVP thing first. So I'm very much for the minimum on MVP. So my idea of an MVP is something you can ship in 2 weeks and start validating a hypothesis. I think your approach to it is more, and I've forgotten who coined the phrase, but more minimum lovable product.
No, it was minimal valuable product. That's what I coined anyway.
So minimum valuable, yeah, yeah, that works too. I think the bears are cute, and you've got real personality.
Thank you.
It's something that I think has great potential to build fans, and as you say, get that people involved, and it's got a lot more personality than if I go and look at a lot of the fitness apps in the App Store. They just look a little bit corporate. There's no investment and emotion about them.
I think if I'd launched a minimum viable product, it would have disappeared. There was 2 elements to this. So there was the expectation of what I was delivering. Okay, so people had an expectation, and if I delivered a minimum viable product, then I don't know if you follow any startup communities, but every week, without fail, there's a new health and fitness app. Someone is just releasing some random health, and it does nothing different. It does nothing special. It maybe does the same thing, but with a slight tweak to it or something like that. That would be a minimum viable product to me, right? And if I'd released that, I think Barely Fit would have just disappeared into the vast waves of fitness apps. There's so many fitness apps out there.
That makes sense.
So there was that aspect to it. And the fact that I released, and within the first day, I think it had something like 200 to 300 downloads. I think we're at like 5,000 or 6,000. I've not even put advertising in this yet. We're at like 5,000 or 6,000. It's been released for like 5 months. I'm making money off of it as well. Not that that was the goal, but it's proven the point. Whereas a lot of these apps that I'm talking about, they've maybe got 10 downloads, 20 downloads, and that's okay. But I think that's the difference between building something that it's still a minimum product, but it's not like the MVP. It's not the minimum viable product. It's not that 2-week build.
So
it's got more polish to it.
We're drifting into startups here, but I think you've got a great point there in that if you're going to build another fitness app, it's been proven there's a demand. You don't need to build that 2-week thing to verify the demand. I think the 2-week quick build to test a hypothesis has got to be if you're trying to do something completely new and unique to find out if your hypothesis is valid. If you're going to build another fitness app or another to-do app or another email client, you don't need to test that hypothesis of what's the minimum email client, will people use email? Because that question's already answered. Your minimum viable product or your minimum valuable product is far higher. It's a far bigger investment, isn't it? So yeah, I think I agree with you from that point of view.
That was one half of it. The other aspect of it is I'm a software engineer. I've got 20 years experience and I'm looking for work. So if I deliver something that is buggy, that doesn't perform well, that looks like trash, that's a reflection on my because most of my work is behind NDAs. You wouldn't know that I've built some of the stuff that's out there. And so if I deliver something to the public that doesn't meet the mark, I probably would have struggled to get work, especially in the current market. The flip side of that is actually my last contract and this role were very much predicated on the work that I did on Barely Fit. The people had downloaded it and tried it, and they're like, they loved what I'd done, even though my React Native experience. So right now I'm a senior React Native engineer for a gambling or like an iGaming company. But Barely Fit, aside from some bits and bobs across the time, is my only React Native experience. And from that, I've gone straight into a senior React Native engineer role. So it kind of shut up the people that thought I was just this loudmouth on LinkedIn that doesn't know what he's talking about, that doesn't know how to code, because that happens a lot, right? And then also on the other side of it is actually encourage people to hire me, and that's what I wanted ultimately as well. I wanted somewhere as a home to kind of spend the next 5-10 years, whatever else, instead of contracting. So yeah, that's the other aspect of it, I guess.
Cool. So yeah, it's been great for that, hasn't it? As you were saying that, I was thinking, yeah, an awful lot of the code I've written was for companies that sadly no longer exist. I mean, I go back to early in my career, I worked for Compaq. No longer exists. I don't think that...
They don't, do they?
Even with the company that acquired them, I don't think that division or that product exists anymore. The AI company that I poured nearly 4 years of my life into, and we did some amazing stuff and got some patents, that company folded last year. So the product no longer exists. So yeah, even if I wanted to say, go and check this out, it's long gone. So yeah, having something like that out in public is an amazing thing to be able to show people and provide that proof point.
Yeah, 100%.
Cool. So what next for Barely Fit, James?
So I did the MVP, and still behind the scenes, I chose Polish in terms of user experience and in terms of branding. So I wanted to make sure that it was a good user experience, regardless of if you had a 7-year-old phone or if you had a brand new iPhone or whatever you had, and also branding. So I wanted to make sure that like the bears were all through it, and I like when you go to different areas, it kind of had that personality about it. I wanted it to feel unique amongst the areas. But behind the scenes, it had maybe 200 unit tests. It had no end-to-end. It had, because everything's stored on the device, there's no servers. It's got an internal database. It's obviously secured, but there's no database migration. So if I want to add new data tables, there was no way of migrating data from one version of the database to the next one. And then same with backups. So although the current system will back up, there was no way as I add extra tables or extra data or change the way that the data is shaped, there was no way to start restoring version 1's backup in the next version and stuff. So it's still very much like a minimum product. But it was just, I chose the code side of it to make it the minimum product. So 1.4, which is what I've been working on a bit longer than I like, is basically taking it from an MVP to what I consider a production product. It's taking it from, so it's adding lots of new features. It's adding lots of things that the community have asked for. It's adding life logs so people can start logging things like their weight, their muscle mass, their like arm mass, all of this lot. It's adding better reporting around that as well, so you can like track the difference between the start of the month and the end of the month for any of those stats as well. It's improving a lot of the UI, so it's a bit more of an adult app. It's kind of focused more on making it simpler to access your data and view your data. There's also, as part of life logs, there's the ability to do not just your weight and stuff, but other life logs. So you can track maybe medication, or you could track or like an injury that's happened. You could track basically anything that you want. It's like a free form. And there's an injury tracker, although that's not going to be live just yet. But basically, the injury tracker will then basically allow you to filter by injury against your exercises and stuff, so that you don't exacerbate an injury by doing certain exercises and stuff like that. So 1.4. Oh, and also we've gone from like 400 tests to 2,500 unit tests now as well. And then all the database schemas. The database schema was all just these JavaScript objects. Now it's like fully typed. Everywhere. It's basically any kind of confidence that I needed in releases has now been poured into this. So backups, you can, even if like 10 years down the line, I release a new version of Barely Fit, your backup today will be restorable in that version of Barely Fit. So like the whole backup system I've overhauled, the whole database setup I've overhauled, everything is now what I would consider a production release. But it's taken me a lot longer than I expected. So I'm hoping to get out soon. But that's basically what's next for Barely Fit. And then we start looking at like workout plan wizards and like integrations. So like device integrations. Also, like a lot of people have asked, I don't want AI in the app, but if people want to use AI, I want to give them like the ability to add like their own ChatGPT key or anything like that. So those types of integrations as well. Basically 2026 is it's going to just transform into an adult health app instead of the MVP, essentially.
Cool. I look forward to seeing that and following the journey more.
Thank you.
What about the other things you've teased? You've teased Barely Hired and Barely Fans. You kept saying adult, so I had to follow up on that.
So I can't talk about Barely Fans. That's a secret, but it's going to be... I'm more keeping it secret because it's funny than anything else. It's going to be the most mundane secret anyone's ever learned. Barely Hired, I still plan to do that, although the plan was actually to learn how to use AI. But I've kind of done that with other stuff anyway. So although I'm still going to put a heavy focus on building it with AI, because I think it's an interesting experiment, how far can you build something with AI? I'm going to reduce the scope quite considerably initially and look at it from a sense point of view. So instead of the original plan was to build a LinkedIn replacement, and that's still the long-term goal. But I think I'm going to take it in stages, and I think I'm going to start with a kind of a recruitment plus type site. So kind of looking at other recruitment platforms, including LinkedIn, and looking at ways of improving all of those, because they all kind of have this like same way of filtering. It's a bit janky, it's a bit shit. They're more focused on the money. I couldn't give a fuck about the money. I can host it cheaply and stuff, so that I'm not worried about that. I'm more worried about the user experience, and I'm more worried about the outcomes and helping people actually get jobs, but also help people list jobs. So that's we're going to start off as essentially a job board, and then over time, Barely Hired is going to become that kind of LinkedIn clone. Well, not clone, but it's going to become it's going to introduce those social aspects to it and kind of grow from there as well. So yeah,
I look forward to seeing that. So, final question from me, and I shall let you go. You mentioned AI. What's been the experience of coding with AI? What do you think?
So I've tried a lot of the popular tools like Cursor, Windsurf, Devin, Claude. What's the other one? What's GitHub? Copilot as well. So I don't like VS Code. I'm not a big fan of VS Code. I like using...
I'm with you there.
As a developer, I think it's like... I'm not saying there's anything wrong with VS Code, but it's not an integrated development environment. It's a code editor that gives you plugins, and that feels... If I'm developing professional software, I feel like I should be using a proper development environment, not VS Code. So things like Cursor, Windsurf, they really put me off because of that. I'm not really interested in that. Copilot, let's just not talk about Copilot. Same with Devin. Devin is just being an absolute joke. Even, and a lot of these things, a lot of people don't realize that although they can use like Sonnet and they can use Opal and Opus, is Opal Opus? Like they can use like Claude models, for example. It's not the same as Claude Code. And so I've been using, it was actually Paul Hammond, who's another person on LinkedIn. Him spending more time on Claude Code made me look into it more. And then the more I've looked into it and the more I've used it, the more I'm like, actually, this is a really useful tool. So I've been heavily, I would say, I've got like the Pro Max subscription. I'm like, some days I'm sat here triple wielding like Claudes on different projects and stuff. There's some things that I let him loose on. I say him, but it's an LLM. There's some things I don't. So Barely Fit, any feature code, he's not touched. But I've also talked through potential solutions with it. So things like the typing for the database, how I wanted to handle it. I had an idea in my head, and I used Claude to then kind of talk through that idea as like a what's that term?
The duck?
Rubber duck. Yeah, that's it. But like as an interactive rubber ducky. That's helped quite a lot. But he's also helped me build a lot of the unit tests out. So there's so much, like so many components and stuff. I've done a good job of keeping things decoupled, but then actually building the unit tests, a lot of time it's just easier to get Claude to do it. And then I have a separate agent that then verifies Claude's work, tells him he did a shit job, and then he goes and fixes it. And then I do like a final pass through of it. On other projects, he's building like whole front ends for me. So Barely Fans, he's built at the moment the majority of the back end and the majority of the front end. I've been doing the branding, but he's done most of like the actual coding on it, and I've just set the standards and set the expectations. Obviously, Barely Hired, that's mostly going to be Claude, and that's, well, I mean, for things like media and stuff, I'm using things like Gemini. I'm using, I can't remember what the other one is. There's a few different ones. ChatGPT I'm using as well for different things. So yeah, from AI perspective, I think I've tested most of them, and I've kind of settled my workflow at the moment is basically Gemini for videos and images, ChatGPT for data and data manipulation and information, and then Claude for generally coding and technical stuff. That's kind of my setup. But I still do a lot of manual coding. Maybe I'm a fossil, but I still do a lot of manual coding. So
I think that's what people miss, is you don't just have to use them as a faster way of typing code. You can use them as a rubber duck to validate ideas, validate requirements. What am I missing from this requirement? What else should be here?
yeah,
what am I missing from this design? What am I missing from this product spec? Yeah. I'm thinking of this architecture. What questions might I not have thought about? It doesn't matter if they hallucinate or they're 100% correct. If they give you that chance to go back and forth, and even if they ask you a dumb question, it might just make you think, oh, yeah, that question's dumb, but actually, I haven't thought about this. So, yeah.
I wanted to learn how to do Minecraft mods. I'd never done Minecraft mod. I thought it'd be a fun stream. So I wanted to learn how to do it. The documentation was absolutely abysmal. Like trying to get to the start point was awful. So then I went straight to ChatGPT. Like after I went through a few threads, I went through the actual documentation. I tried to look at other documentation. I went to ChatGPT. I talked through what I was trying to achieve. Although I gave it the different classes because it was all in Java. I gave it the different Java classes. These were all like quite large classes that were like modules and libraries that had been brought in. And I told it what I was trying to do. I told it what I couldn't work out, what I was missing, and just giving it the code and having it go through that code and kind of dissect it for me helped me actually get, like, it didn't give me the answer, but it helped me get to the point that I could actually get started, and then I could like expand from that. And that's just because the documentation failed. Like the documentation was not good for that. And I found it quite useful for things like that. But then also when I'm learning, I don't want to learn Swift. I hate Swift. It's horrible language. But I need to do a lot of Swift code for Barely Fit, especially. So whilst I didn't want to learn Swift, I then shared my goal. So, all right, I want to build this function, or I want to integrate with this type of database, or something like that. And then I would then like use AI to kind of take me step by step through that process. And then as I'd learn the syntax and as I'd learn how things fit together, I'd then tweak that and expand that myself on top of that. So it's been, I find it really useful for that kind of stuff, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, if there's something like maybe a new language you don't know, but you've still got all that years of experience and you've got a taste of what is good code and what isn't, it's very powerful then, isn't it, to better leverage that and move forward.
Yeah, 100%.
Back to your earlier point, if you just give it to somebody that's inexperienced and you say, here you are, I've got AI, go and do it, they haven't developed that taste, they haven't got that experience, so they're not going to really know whether it's working well or not. So I think it can be a great amplifier. If you've got that experience, you've got the right processes, you've got good taste, it can amplify that. If you are missing those elements, you could create a lot of crap quite quickly.
It's just a mess.
Awesome. All right. Thank you very much for your time, James.
It's all right. Thanks for the chat. It's been nice.
It's been great talking to you. Any last thing that you want to share before we say goodbye?
No, not at all. It's been really nice talking to you, and I've enjoyed this. So thank you.
All right.
Thanks for having me on.
And we'll stick links to Barely Fit and anything else that you are ready to share in the show notes.
Thank you. Sounds good.
All right. Cheers, James. Thank you.
Cheers, man. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of Coding Chats. If you did, please like and subscribe. And feel free to check out these other videos on a similar topic.